Moriden Athluan.
Working from within, Moriden Stormcrown created distrust, hatred, and discord within the ranks of the mighty vampire army raised by the ancient bloodline of Clan Volkar.
Cursing the name of he who defeated them, these vampire hordes were driven back to the plains of oblivion.
And so we find ourselves thrown together once again, my friend. Almost as if one of us were looking for the other. But why would either of us do that?
To self-improvement and the training of long-ignored talents and abilities.
Even as he trained at the illustrious and fabled Mages' College of Winterhold, Moriden still continued to search for a solution to the continuing dragon attacks.
Spending his time, now, searching for answers among the countless tomes of the Arcaneum library, it would not be long before he was again called on to save all of Skyrim. Nay, all of
Is
the
that where we left
the
off?
grasping hands of power mad men.
Once again, the bards only tell you what they believe to be truth. They weren't there. They don't understand. You, though. You, of all people, need to understand. So let me tell you what the bards will not, what they cannot. Because the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Eight Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. The ride and hike back to the top of the throat took me a fair bit of the morning. My counsel with Parthenax took some more. I will say this for the old dove, it has clearly been thinking on the questions I posed it for some time. Though I've said that I can trust a dove to stick with its word, one must be careful they hear what they said, and not what you wished to hear. Thus the saying among their own kind that it is unwise to trust a dove. They are, as Parthenax readily admits, made to dominate, to rule, to drive and gather and exercise power is built into their very nature. We mortals call that evil, and from our perspective, we would be correct. From theirs, it is equally correct. And yet, Parthenax has been able to overcome this position and sympathize more with us than with his own kind. The very fact that we stand here having this conversation confirms this. It betrayed Alduin. It taught mortals the voice. For thousands of years, a huge time when Alduin and the rest of the Dove were gone completely, it has remained here, at the throat, teaching and meditating, still, when it could have conquered the world on its own with little difficulty. This is even more true in the last 200 years since the Oblivion Crisis. It teaches even now. It has given me all I needed to face Alduin and survive him. It has told me how to track the World Eater, and it has even accepted that I might decide that it has to die. Not that it will go quietly, I'm sure. Paarthurnax has spent several thousand years proving it can restrain itself. Those that it was responsible for killing or hurting are long since gone. And this is not the era of the Dragon Wars. I've not had much luck in trusting others, but here, in this moment, I choose to trust. This does not mean we will not watch, but I refuse to act as executioner for a war and for actions I was never part of. Delphine was not easy to convince. Really, with her, it comes down to two things. First, what is known of Paarthurnax's history, and second, what her oaths and sworn word means to her. For the first, I can hardly argue. I hadn't been aware that Paarthurnax was Alduin's right hand until she told me, only that it had been among the combatants in the Dragon Wars. She isn't wrong that its actions, some of the atrocities it committed, are remembered even today. That said, are our own histories correct? Or are they a reflection of the people who wrote it, who still had hatred and fear fresh in their hearts? I know Dragonrend. I know better than anyone how they felt about the Dove. We cannot know what is in its heart. But its actions, since it revealed itself to me, are clear enough that I am willing to allow it to try. Her oaths were a far simpler conversation. She said it herself. Her oaths are to serve and protect the Dragonborn. Though previous holders of the title may have turned their ability into something used to hunt them to extinction, that is not what the Blades were. Foremost, they were bodyguards. Followers. Delphine knows the importance of a chain of command, and by her own admission, she isn't the one in charge. I am. She serves the Dragonborn. In that context, her opinions matter, but will not be the sole determining factor to my actions. She accepted this, if reluctantly, but urged me to speak to Esbern first. He, after all, knows the histories far better than she does. Delphine isn't wrong here, and if I want to hear both sides equally, then I suppose it is only right. Surprisingly, Esbern's concerns were easy for me to address. Though he did bring up the past, as Delphine did, I already had my reasons there, and explained them at length to Esbern. I don't disagree that years, lots and lots of years, acting correctly cannot expiate the sins that occurred before them. That supposition has always relied on a single assumption, that the one committing the crimes was mortal. A dove, by its nature, is not mortal. It does not act to keep itself alive in the same way a mortal would. Thus, the argument that Paarthurnax only changed to save its own life makes no sense, especially given the evidence that all it takes is a single survivor to repopulate all of dragonkind. Esbern acknowledged the point, and partially even agreed, once I added that for thousands of years now, Paarthurnax has been alone in a way we could never understand. That, I argue, is not unlike being held in solitary confinement. The fact that the old dove hasn't reverted to its nature or gone insane only underlines the base change to its personality. Instead, Esbern's concern is for the future. But here he has allowed himself to confuse things. According to legend, it is Alduin who will end the world. Yet his concern is that it will be Paarthurnax instead, having outweighted all of the original Dragonborn, the original Septum line, ignored a 200-year gap in time where there were no Dragonborn, and then outweighted my own not inconsiderable lifespan. Who will rise and end the world instead? It simply does not make sense. If it was going to try, the time right after the Oblivion Crisis would have been the most opportune. It might have suspected that Alduin would return, and where, but only suspected, not known. If Paarthurnax was so concerned about its own life, it could have offered the world to Alduin on a plate. I put my foot down at this point. Paarthurnax will live, and my word will be obeyed. 9 Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. I left Karthspire and the temple with strict instructions to stay out of the Greybeards and Paarthurnax's business. However, there is a flip side. There is, at the moment, 3 dragons whose deaths I will not allow. The other 2 are Paarthurnax's current students, in the way of the voice. That leaves a near limitless number of Dove who are still active threats, and we have a grand total of 3 blades, counting myself. I've given permission to begin scouting for potential new members of the group, which Delphine was grateful for. Hours later, I pulled into the Nightgate Inn, where an up-and-coming merchant by the name of Ariana has been waiting for me. The conversation was as brief and to the point as you might expect. She has been considering opening a store of her own for some time, and doing so under the guild's auspices would reduce her overhead considerably. The one concern, demand, really, that she had was the need to be able to sell to the general public as well. We negotiated somewhat, not on her ability to sell, but on how much of a discount guild members would be able to receive. Once that was done, she shook my hand, and then took off for Solitude. The final recruit on Aryen's list is a Khajiit mage. Not the normal pair of words you might expect to hear together like that, but Latoria is not a normal Khajiit. Nor a normal mage either, really. Despite years of effort, she's been unable to learn even the most basic of magics from the teachers of the college. This, she believes, is because what she needs to learn, she cannot from books. She needs to be able to commune with ancient places, Falmer ruins, Dwemer cities, Nordic tombs, and the like. The exact places the guild can get her access to safely. In the meantime, her knowledge of magic is not at fault, and so can also act as an advisor on all things magicka while she builds her own ability to make use of it. A fair trade, I think. And since Orion sent me to find her, I have to imagine he would agree. Not long ago, Septimus's request of me might have held a bit more appeal. I did not expect what he told me, and I barely understood most of it. The cube he has been trying to enter, it has to relate to it, naturally. The information I brought him on the lexicon has led him to think that in some fashion blood is a key component, specifically Dwemer blood. This naturally is a problem, as there are none alive who still have this. The effort, then, seems doomed to fail. And yet, he believes he has a solution, something that even the Dwemer hadn't considered. Septimus believes that by combining, in some arcane fashion, the blood of the remaining Mer races, that he can create something that will fool the cube and allow him entry. As I said, a few weeks ago, and the prospect of taking blood from all of the Mer might have appealed. Now, having left that life behind, I can only view it as distasteful. On the other hand, the secrets inside that cube. Speaking of things I did not see coming, I should have remembered something from the last time I spoke with Septimus, the belief that there was something more at work here, a presence. I'd all but forgotten it, really, with all that has happened, and as I hadn't felt it this time, there had been nothing to call it back to memory, until, that is, I turned to leave the cave, and was confronted with a dark and formless thing from the deepest reaches of nightmare. Hermaeus Mora, Lord of Hidden Knowledge, was waiting for me. Septimus barely noticed anything around him, and so, though we spoke about the old man, he had no clue that such was the case. Like all the daedric lords lately, it seems that Mora has been watching me with interest. Given the things I have been uncovering, finding, and learning, I suppose it should be no surprise. even less so since I lent my assistance to Septimus, who is rapidly reaching the point of being useless to Mora. The offer is simple. Do as Septimus asks, and then, when the cube is opened, take the old mage's place. I expect that means I'll end up killing the old man. That seems to be how the daedric lords deal with loose ends, I suppose. The thought of killing him should bother me, I think. It isn't that I haven't killed before, obviously, but never someone quite so defenseless. Really, it's a consideration for much later. I have to get all that blood, after all. Although Septimus's mission is of some importance, it does little to advance my current agenda. The college, therefore, seems to be my only way forward, a place where information on the dragon priests can be found, with any luck. There are always dangers, however, when getting involved with mages. Or so I've always heard. I've not really had much ability to get to know any of them on a first-name basis. The few mages I can name, Wounfirth of Windhelm, Calselmo of Markarth, and one who shall continue to remain nameless, Immortal, are all eccentric in their own ways. Septimus seems to be of a type with them, really, just in a very exaggerated way. All of them thirst after knowledge, the way your average Nord thirsts after mead. Both of those are dangerous. The Nord to your furniture, and the mages to the sanity of those about them. Still, if there is knowledge to be found, if there is a way to weaken Alduin enough that I can kill it instead of fighting it off again, then this seems to be a risk I must take. I made my way straight to the Arcaneum, of course. While it is possible that one of the students or instructors here might have the knowledge I seek ready to hand in their heads, I count that as a small chance. For the students, they are busy learning the manipulation of the world's energies. For the instructors, based on the notes I've seen about the college, they are busy keeping the students from playing pranks on each other by manipulating the world's energies. Children, it seems, do not change, no matter how much power they have. So, the Arcaneum and the librarian. He remembered me, of course. It's not every day someone comes in asking about Elder Scrolls. I was able to confirm that Septimus was still alive, though for how much longer is anyone's guess. I even managed to get half a smile out of the old orc by turning over 4 books I found in the Forgotten Vale, untranslated Falmer originals. Those got me a few thousand septims from his own personal funds, and translated copies to boot. But where access to his domain was concerned, I hit a brick wall. The old Orzamer absolutely refuses to open access to his halls to anyone not a member of the college. The last time was a special circumstance, one that does not apply now. I am reluctant to join the college, if I even can, just to have access to the library. On the other hand, what have I to lose? Alduin will not return to Mundus soon, if Odahviing is to be believed. Learning to amplify my own abilities with magic might not be a horrible idea. I have some talent. I've been using flames since I left Windhelm, though being honest with myself, I barely understand what I'm doing with them. It took some time, and a few questions, to find what I believe amounts to the mistress of novices here at the college, a woman named Mirabelle. She seemed surprised to have me request to be a student, but more so because there have been so many of late than anything to do with me specifically. That being the case, she admitted me on the spot and then gave me a quick tour around the facility, including showing me a room that will be mine for the duration of my stay. Having done that, she rushed me to the Hall of Elements where I would meet with Tulfdir, one of the college's most esteemed wizards, who would begin my training and, from the sound of it, that of other apprentices as well. The first lessons were fairly basic, though they did provide me with some insight. As an entirely self-taught mage to this point, I've not given much thought to how the power works, where it comes from, or some of the dangers that seem to go with it. The first two, honestly, still don't matter much to me. So long as the power comes when it is called and does as I wish it to, I don't care what creates the energies. The latter one, though, the dangers, those only a fool does not heed. What Tolfdir told us, however, still seems somewhat basic. If one does not learn to control their power, it will come back to hurt the wielder instead. I have some little personal experience with this, I think, though with other forms of power. Some things, it seems, do not change, no matter what form the power takes. We spent the evening working with wards and their protective nature, something we will need before we can move on to practicing the more destructive spells that I am more interested in. Since fire seems to be a natural ability of mine, I would be a fool indeed not to learn to contain it first. Perhaps this will not be a waste of my time. Though the Arcaneum still calls to me, I must admit that this also seems to be drawing me in a way I had not expected. I hadn't noticed him much during the training, but as I was leaving, another of those who were in the hall caught my attention. He wasn't a student, and from his clothes I knew he certainly wasn't a member of the staff here. Those robes are unique to just one group, and given my few interactions with them to date, I suddenly had cause for concern. A Thalmor. From his attention on everything, I'd even wager he is what might be called an obvious spy. He's not here to learn. He's here to observe, to keep an eye on what the Thalmor might think to be a place where true opposition to their rule might rise. For a professional observer, however, I'd say he, or his masters, are very unobservant. The mages here don't care who rules Skyrim or Tamriel, I think, so long as they can still practice their magics. For me personally, however, he could be a problem. If he ever puts the new students here together with the Mer who invaded the embassy and killed their men and inquisitors, well, things could get very messy very quickly. I'd best stay out of his sight and notice as much as possible. 10 Evening Star, 4th Era, 201. If I am to be a student here, then a student I shall be. I don't know how to pretend to learn or study, so for the time being I will do exactly as I am expected to do. Learn how to use magic. To that end, I spent a great deal of the morning in the lower floor of the Hall of Elements, flinging every version of a fire spell I knew at rocks. These rocks glow when hit with magic, so I know I'm at least affecting them, but I feel like I'm not getting anything new from my experimentation here. Maybe it's because I know that rocks stand still and don't dodge, like everything else I'll ever have a purpose of flinging flames at. Since, however, we are expected to find a way to get better at it, then perhaps I need to find another way to develop this skill. Basic control is, I think, already established, else I'd have burnt myself to a cinder weeks past. No, I need a way to simulate actual combat, learn how quickly and how badly I can toss off the fire spells when under stress. Control in a very controlled environment is one thing. Control in the middle of combat is another entire. The people of Winterhold are still very wary of magic despite its proximity, but perhaps in the city there is a training yard I can use, something that will give me the practice I need while getting the people a little more used to seeing magic in their area. You don't get used to that by hiding from it, and if they thought about it for half a moment, being next door to the greatest collection of magical users in Skyrim should be a comfort, as much as it is a concern. Naturally, since I was trying to appear as just a student, that was the one thing I wouldn't be allowed to be. Walking through Winterhold trying to find a few training dummies to practice on, the city came under attack from another dragon. As I am still, to the best of my knowledge, the only one who can fight these things and kill them on a more permanent basis, I didn't have much choice, especially if I wanted to live myself. The fight involved most of the city, with many of the locals taking up arms against the beast. On that front, I can only give them credit. With their help, the beast fell in a rather short time, though a number of the local animals didn't survive the experience. Another dragon's knowledge now rests in my head, and my identity as the Dragonborn will be spread across the city and college before long, I wager. The word spread all right. By evening, it was all over the college. The Dragonborn was here. I could barely get any time to myself. The instructors all wanted to get time with me to investigate how the Thuum works, if the shouts were actually magic after all, and all kinds of related nonsense. It got bad enough that at one point I turned to look over a rail and shouted the unrelenting force shout in frustration. That gave everyone about 5 seconds pause while they considered their pestering of me again, and then it started all over again, this time with, if anything, more excitement. I managed to finally get free of them, just for Tolfdir to find me. He pulled me aside in the Hall of Attainment, just outside my new quarters, and gave me some sound advice. Perhaps, for the time, I need to vanish. Go and clear my head while the college gets their own heads squared away. I am saddened to admit that I took that advice quickly. There is nothing they can show me here, not while they all see me as some kind of hero or living myth. I gave the old wizard a small note of thanks when he further offered to distract everyone. I'll have a few days before I'm missed anyhow. The question is, what to do with that time? Almost as if waiting for the question, a voice sounded in my head that night as I dreamed. Just a single word. Dawnstar. I didn't know the voice, but thanks to Azira, I knew the presence that went with it. Another daedric lord, just what I needed.